So the book of Judges ends with this longing for a king, right? It's really a disgusting, depressing ending to the book as a whole, but yet maybe there's this glimmer of hope that the author's trying to point you to by continuing to say, in those days there was no king. Everyone was doing what was right in his own eyes. It was a horrible time in Israel's history, but that leads us right into the 8th book of the Bible, the book of Ruth. A little short book, a little love story. You can really get some great courtship and dating principles from this book. Not really. I probably wouldn't do everything that you find in this book, but it is going to be an incredible story. And you come into the book of Ruth, and I want you to see in the very first verses why I think in our English Bibles at least, Ruth is placed right here after the book of Judges. It's because what you read in Ruth 1, verse 1, in the days when the judges ruled. Okay, so this story is taking place during the chaotic days of the judges. And we find out in the first verse of Ruth that in these days there was a famine in the land. This is one of many that we have heard about in the story of the Bible, just a continued reminder, right, of the curse from the garden against the land, that it would be through great difficulty that human beings would even be able to survive on the land. And here you have this happening again, and we're drawn to this family that we don't really know anything about. But they're from Bethlehem in Judah, and the man's name is Elimelech, and he has a wife, Naomi, and they got 2 sons, and they leave Bethlehem in Judah, and they go to a foreign place. They go to Moab, and down there the 2 sons get married. They get married to a girl named Orpah and a girl named Ruth. And they live down there for a while, and what happens is Naomi's husband Elimelech dies, and Orpah's husband and Ruth's husbands, they both die too. And so now all that's left is Naomi with her 2 daughters-in-law, these Moabite women. And you have this story where Naomi is feeling like she's going to go back. She's going to go back home, and she feels like God has dealt so bitterly with her, like everything in her life has been taken away. And you can sympathize with her, and she feels like she's going to go back to where she came from, and with nothing, completely empty. And so she actually tells the daughters who love her, the daughter-in-laws who love her, stay here. Stay among your own people. Follow your own gods. Don't go back with me. There's nothing I can do for you. There's no future for you with me. And this brings us into Ruth chapter 1. And if you look down in verse 10, they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me?" Verse 12, "Turn back, my daughters." And this continues on. And in verse 14, they lift up their voices and they weep again. And Orpah kisses her mother-in-law, but Ruth clings to her. So Orpah actually leaves, but Ruth clings to Naomi. And she said, this is Naomi in verse 15, she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to the people and to her gods. Return." Turn back after her. But Ruth said, "Don't urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And Naomi sees this, and she relents, and she lets Ruth come with her. And we're not going to go through the whole story, this great love story that comes up after this in the story of Ruth. But what I would highlight right now is when you think of Ruth, a Moabite woman, right? There's absolute chaos, right, in Israel during the time of the judges. And you're like, where can you find anybody who's got faith in Yahweh? And then you read Ruth and you find a Moabite woman whose husband, Israelite husband, is dead, whose own mother-in-law is saying time after time, "Don't come back with me. Go back to your own gods." And she says, no, I want to go with you. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. I will go with you. And you see God again, maybe in a comparison with Rahab, reaching down into the most unlikely of places, to the most unlikely of women, and saying, that's going to be mine. She'll be mine. And we see the wideness of God's mercy and his work extending outside beyond the borders of Israel, even when it's chaos in Israel, in fact. Here we find a faith-filled woman, a Moabite woman, wanting to follow the Lord and serve her mother-in-law and take care of her. And then we could also think of something else about Ruth here. I wonder if there isn't somewhat of a comparison, and I wanted to read what I did there, so maybe you could hear about it. But think of this, of her saying, no, I will leave everything behind. The gods, the family, the country, and I will go with you to a land that I do not know, and I'll serve the Lord in that land and anything. I wonder if Ruth isn't being presented kind of along the same lines as Rebecca and on the same lines as Abraham. A woman of faith willing to leave everything behind and venture out in faith to a land she's never seen because she's trusting in the Lord. Well, you read through the rest of the story of Ruth, and there's this amazing story of how Ruth, a young lady, gets connected with a faithful man in Israel, a man named Boaz. And it is a great love story. And by the end, Naomi's heart is restored. She sees Ruth marry Boaz and is able to see them have an offspring. And it's this incredible story of redemption, how God uses Boaz and Ruth to really rescue Naomi and change her and bring joy to her. And yet our attention is drawn at the end of the book to something very specific, very important, and we're even going to hear a phrase that we haven't heard in a really, really long time. And this is really what I want us to see, the end of the book of Ruth. Look at Ruth 4, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He will be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. And then Naomi, the one who had felt like, call me, I think before she was saying, call me Mara, just bitterness, like I am so empty. She takes up this little boy, this grandson, and she laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. And they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And then look at this line, because we haven't seen it in this way since the book of Genesis. Now these are the generations of Perez. And you say, wait a second, who is Perez? I mean, these are the generations of? Like that was the marker throughout all of the book of Genesis that we're moving forward, tracking the promise of the seed. And now at the end of Ruth, after all of those books and all of those generations, it says, now these are the generations of Perez. And we say, who is Perez? He is the son of Judah. Remember Judah? Genesis 38, that crazy chapter of Judah and Tamar. And they had children together, twins, one of them named Perez and Zerah. These are the generations of Perez. So the author is now reaching back and linking in to that story, the son of Judah. These are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram to Amminadab. Amminadab, Nahshon. Nahshon, Salmon. Salmon, Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. So think of it. The end of the book of Judges. You leave disgusted, right? But thinking, longing, maybe a king is coming. Then you come into the book of Ruth, and you're drawn not now to Levites, like at the end of the book of Judges, but to a man from Bethlehem of Judah. And now you see at the end of the book, Ruth, a Moabite woman, has been married to a descendant of Judah, Boaz. And then you see these are the generations, and it links all the way back and runs all the way down. And twice at the end of the book, we are led to this one name. Boaz and Ruth have a son named Obed, and he's the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of David, and then these are the generations of, and it leads you to the very last word of the book of Ruth, and what is it? It's David, twice. See, at the end of the book, David, David. And you think, boy, I wish I knew who that was, because the end of the book of Judges tells me we need a king, and the end of the book of the Ruth stirs this longing in my heart to know who David is.